is day 21 of trial.
All right, Ms. Herman.
Good morning, Your Honor. Nicole Herman, HERMANN, bar number 126353.
Good morning, Your Honor. Madeline Loeb, spelled L-O-E-B, bar number 173970.
All right. Ms. Weinmiller.
Good morning, Your Honor. Chris Weinmiller, Ms. Brophy. Weinmiller is W-I-N-E-M-I-L-L-E-R, and my bar number is 863177.
All right, Ms. Maxfield.
Good morning, Your Honor. Lisa Maxwell, also here with Ms. Brophy. My bar number is 844337, and my last name is spelled M-A-X-F-I-E-L-D.
All right. And before we get started, I have to rule on the two motions that were argued on Friday. For each of them, I'm going to give a fairly detailed explanation of my ruling so that the sides understand them and so that the record is clear. Now, the first is the defense motion to exclude the rebuttal testimony of Andrea Jacobs. And that motion makes three arguments for its position. I'm provisionally denying the motion. Ms. Jacobs will be allowed to testify if the defense case puts on rebuttable evidence. Now, the first basis for objection was that the state violated discovery rules by not providing information as to Ms. Jacobs earlier in the case. The court finds there is no such violation. The state learned the identity of Ms. Jacobs on Tuesday, April 26th of 2022, which was several days after they had arrested their case in chief. Detectives flew to Texas and interviewed her on Thursday, April 28th. The state notified defense of their intention to call Mrs. Jacobs over the weekend as a potential rebuttal alibi witness, which either would have been April 30th or May 1st. I don't recall the specific date, but I do recall that on Monday, May 2nd, which was the first day that the defense case was set to begin, both sides were aware of the witness. The defense case in chief was slated to run between 2 to 3 weeks. So the state notified defense of its intention to call Ms. Jacobs, as well as provide discovery on the substance of her testimony as soon as reasonably practicable under the circumstances. For me, the bigger issue was whether or not the testimony would violate Mrs. Brophy's due process, 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And considering that objection, I reviewed the cases cited by defense, as well as a number of other cases which I'll place on the record. And while they're not precisely the scenario we have here, I believe that the following cases provide guidance to the court on evaluating what constitutes fundamental fairness under circumstances that are substantially similar to the present case. In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court found that a then existing Oregon statute, which required defense to file notice of an alibi defense without requiring reciprocal discovery by the state concerning rebuttal alibi witnesses, violated the due process clause. And that case is Wardius versus, well, I think I've written the name wrong here. We'll call it Wardius at 412 U.S. 470, a 1973 case. Now, since that time, there have been a number of federal cases that have addressed factual scenarios where the underlying discovery statutes were not violative of due process on their face, but circumstances surrounding late discovery of rebuttal alibi witnesses could have violated a defendant's right to due process. So in 1988, 15 years after Wardius was decided, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit considered a factual scenario where the discovery statutes did not require defense to provide notice of alibi witness, and similarly, they did not require the state to provide notice of rebuttal alibi witnesses. Nonetheless, the two sides filed competing motions to compel discovery in the case, and the trial court ordered discovery that was arguably ambiguous as to the issue of alibi and rebuttal alibi witnesses. The defense, in keeping with the spirit of the order, provided notice of all witnesses they intended to call. The state provided a list of 59 witnesses, but deliberately omitted a alibi rebuttal witness, arguing that the statute didn't require it. And the court found that that form of, quote, deliberate sandbagging, end quote, was found to violate the due process clause. That was in Mauricio versus Duckworth at 840 F. 2nd 454. In 1994, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit reviewed a case where the defendant was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Defense provided notice of alibi witnesses in advance of trial. After one such witness testified, the state learned of a rebuttal alibi witness and presented her testimony. Because there was no question that the state learned the identity of the witness after the defense alibi witness testified, no violation of due process was found. That was Griffin versus Delo or Dello, D-E-L-O, at 33 F. 3rd 859. And then lastly, in 2000, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second District decided Vasquez versus Strack at 228 F. 3rd 143. That was a robbery case where the defense presented several alibi witnesses. After they had testified, the trial judge granted the state a 2-day continuance to investigate the identity of a rebuttal alibi witness that they believed they would now be able to locate given the testimony of the defense alibi witnesses. The witness was located and testified. On appeal, defense argued that the rebuttal evidence should have been excluded when it was reasonably available to the prosecution via investigation, but not turned over to the defense before the alibi witness testified. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second District reviewed the matter as to whether the state court's allowance of the testimony was contrary to or involved an unreasonable application of clearly established federal law and concluded it did not. In the present case, defendants in a better position than any of the defendants for the cases that I've just cited. Unlike those cases, defense learned of the witness before the start of their case in chief, although, admittedly, either a day or on the day that they were to start their case. But they also learned of the witness at least 2 weeks before, if not longer, the witness might ever be called to testify. While the court appreciates that defense has been in trial and could not focus as much on this witness as they might otherwise like, they have had a greater opportunity to learn about the witness and possible impeachment of the witness than defense attorneys in the cases I had just mentioned. It's true that defense might have hoped to learn more about the witness through a more thorough investigation. It's unknown whether or not additional investigation would have led to impeachment that's allowable under the rules of evidence. The court has been impressed by the diligence of the defense team and its ability to obtain material in short order that will be no doubt useful in cross-examining the state's witness if she testifies. The defense team has very high standards and, at least in this court's view, has far exceeded merely competent representation. I would also like to note that the quality of Ms. Jacobs' testimony may not be as strong as the rebuttal alibi witness testimony in the cases I've cited. Ms. Jacobs herself expresses reservations about her perceptions as well as doubts about whether what Ms. Brophy said was actually an admission. Now, the third defense objection to the witness is that there's no evidence to rebut that the state has that there's no evidence to rebut. In essence, that the state has known Ms. Brophy denied committing the murder all along. I note that a defendant can, in fact, be their own alibi witness. In Wardius, the defendant was sanctioned because he had violated the then Oregon statute that required notice of alibi witnesses. Not only did that prevent him from calling other alibi witnesses, it prohibited him from testifying that he wasn't present at the place and time of the murder. An alibi is an explanation that a person wasn't present at a place and time of criminal act, regardless of who it is that provides the testimony or evidence. Now, my understanding from the state is that Ms. Jacobs is a potential rebuttal alibi witness. A determination as to whether she can actually rebut an alibi or other aspects of the defense case can only be made upon conclusion of the defense case, which is why I indicated that I'm provisionally denying the motion. Now, I next turn to the defense motions in limine related to impeachment of Ms. Jacobs. Defense is asking for leeway in addressing Ms. Jacobs' testimony, both in terms of the scope of cross-examination and the scope of rebuttal witnesses. Now, with regards to cross-examination, defense may ask questions related to her potential bias for testifying. The state suggests that she has none, that she's been offered nothing for her testimony and is in fact reluctant to testify. This may be true, but I don't conclude that it is. As defense notes, Ms. Jacobs' track record is one of an unusually prolific liar. Although only convicted in 2 cases, those cases involved acts of deception ranging from 2011 to 2015, and then again from 2018 to 2020. She's also currently under investigation for deceptive acts that occurred allegedly between 2017 to 2019, so a period of time from 2011 to 2020. Ms. Maddox, a former assistant U.S. attorney, could not rule out that Ms. Jacobs was seeking consideration for pending state cases during settlement discussions involving her 2 federal matters. So I will allow a slight expansion on what the rules of evidence might otherwise allow, as I feel it's appropriate under the circumstances to ensure protection of the defendant's constitutional due process rights, but it will not be as expansive as what I believe defense seeks. With regards to the 2 previous convictions, I will allow information to be presented as to the years of criminal activity the conviction encompasses. For example, defense can present information that the 2018 federal case involved acts that occurred between 2011 to 2015. They can also elicit information that the second federal case from 2020 involved acts of deception occurring between 2018 to 2020. I will not allow evidence or questions about the specific acts that were committed during these time ranges. I will allow cross-examination into defendant's possible bias for testifying in this case. Specifically, defense may inquire into Ms. Jacobs' knowledge of a pending state investigation into, I believe it was Medicaid fraud, and that the investigation is related to acts committed between the years 2017 to 2019. They cannot present evidence or ask questions about the specific acts committed. Defense can also ask if Ms. Jacobs hopes that her testimony in the present case will assist her in potential negotiation of that investigation. I will not allow cross-examination into the specific acts Ms. Jacobs may have committed in that case. Like anyone, Ms. Jacobs is presumed innocent until proven guilty, and at least as of today, she hasn't been charged with anything. I'll also allow defense to ask Ms. Jacobs if her 2 convictions span criminal conduct from the range of 2011 to 2015, and then again 2018 to 2020, as well as the fact that she was on release for the first federal case when she committed the acts that constituted the facts of the second conviction. But again, I will not allow inquiry into the specific acts that made up the criminal convictions. Additionally, I will allow rebuttal in this case, and I believe it would be error if I did not. I'll allow defense to call witnesses to testify as to their opinion or knowledge of the defendant's reputation for dishonesty. I will not allow inquiry into specific acts of deception the witnesses observed, but I will allow a little more leeway on testimony which establishes the background for how the witness knows Ms. Jacobs. For example, I would allow Dr. Haney, the dentist, to state his status as the victim of the second federal case, as well as the time frame for which the criminal conduct occurred. I would not allow him to testify as to the specific acts Ms. Jacobs engaged in. I would allow an AUSA to explain that they were the prosecutor for a particular case and the range of time the criminal conduct occurred over. But again, I would not allow testimony on the specific acts that constituted the crime. Now, if either side becomes confused about the parameters of what I will and won't allow, I suggest they bring it up before Ms. Jacobs' actual testimony, but that will be my ruling. Now, my understanding is that defense may want to break before continuing, but I'm not sure how long.
Just a few minutes. Can I ask just a couple questions?
Of course.
Your Honor, you suggested that the content of the defense case would determine whether the it was provisionally admissible, but that would depend on what we presented. And I didn't hear much elaboration about what
Sure.
would take us over that line.
So let me explain that. I will view so I think there's sort of two separate areas. Originally, my understanding of the state's position was that if Mrs. Brophy testifies that she that she didn't shoot her husband or wasn't in OCI when the shooting occurred, I do think that would allow for the rebuttal, because I do think a defendant can be their own alibi witness. But the state brought up other issues as well, completely independent. They made arguments, for example, that various witnesses had described the marriage of Mrs. Brophy and Mr. Brophy as loving and caring and never a cross word, and that they thought maybe Ms. Jacobs' testimony might address that. I'm not entirely sure it does, but they brought that up at least as possibly calling her as a witness to rebut things other than an alibi. I'm just not sure whether or not they intend to do that at this point. I don't know if they're sure or not whether they intend to do that at this point. To the extent you can answer that, Mr. Overstreet, could you?
Sure. Your Honor, kind of along the lines of what you just identified as far as the Brophy relationship, but I think what we were more focusing on was defense has spent some time in their case drawing out from witnesses Ms. Brophy's emotions and reactions to Dan's death. I think Ms. Jacobs can offer that Ms. Brophy was not like that in her time with her. That she was not, when she would describe Dan, it was more just matter of fact, not expressing emotion or sorrow for her loss, things like that. So it would be to rebut the defense witnesses that they've called describing how Ms. Brophy felt about Dan's death, essentially.
Okay.
But I do agree, Your Honor. I mean, a lot of Ms. Jacobs' testimony, and obviously the primary focus would be centered around what defense continues to present here. But you touched on a defendant being able to be their own alibi witness. But I also think that it goes a little bit beyond that. You touched on two areas, I think, that she either wasn't there or did not shoot her husband, was not at the Culinary Institute. I think also she testifies as to what we would anticipate, which is, I don't remember. I think that Ms. Jacobs would also be a relevant witness for the fact that Ms. Brophy disclosed to Ms. Jacobs something that she did remember, i.e. the fact that she was so far away when she shot her husband. So I do think that there's probably some topics that defense might cover with Ms. Brophy that would still allow for that testimony. That being said, I'm 100% fine with and probably would encourage that we might need to have a 104 hearing with Ms. Jacobs before her testimony to understand the parameters of what she is going to be permitted to testify to.
Right. I mean, I would say this. I read the transcript, and even if she's coming in to rebut evidence that is in the defense case, I certainly think she says things in the transcript which would not be allowable, and I do think that if she's going to be called as a witness, either some form of a 104 hearing, or maybe, I don't even know if that's necessary, it may be, but I would encourage defense to point out areas of her testimony that they feel would not be proper, and we may need to take a break between the defense case and the presentation of this witness. At least, I'm not suggesting a particularly lengthy break, but I am suggesting enough time to make sure that defense has a chance to go through this transcript again and sort of highlight areas that they think would not actually be rebuttal, so that we can have a discussion on that.
Sure.
But Ms. Weinmiller, this was originally your question, so I'm coming back to you. Did I answer your question?
You did, Your Honor. I had three, and you answered another one as you were completing your ruling about pretrial release. But the third is, you mentioned that we could question her as to whether she hopes for or has some expectation of consideration or a benefit that has not yet been awarded, but
Right.
would be imminent and valuable to her in the state case. And I would ask you to make sure that that is expansive enough to include other investigations, and specifically the compassionate release motion that's now pending in federal court.
Sure.
Or if there is a fraud bankruptcy investigation in federal court, you know, we don't know exactly
Yeah,
what the
it
scope
does
is,
not, it doesn't have to be limited. If there are grounds to believe there are other investigations or, you know, the compassionate release issue that she might hope to gain benefit for, that's fine. I am not allowing, though, inquiry into specific acts. I think I've made that fairly clear. Go ahead, Mr. Overstreet.
To address that point, Your Honor, I think even the question of asking about, are you aware of a fraud bankruptcy investigation, it suggests some wrongdoing. And so I think from our perspective, the question is permissible, but should be limited to asking if you're aware, first of all, of any open investigation. I think that's a threshold question that
Sure.
needs to be answered, because if she's not aware, there should be no follow-up questions. But asking that threshold question, and then if you are aware of any active investigation, is the purpose of your testimony to curry favor with the state in those open investigations? So I think it should be limited away from identifying even what the investigation's about, because it does suggest some wrongdoing, and she's not been proven guilty of anything in the open investigations.
Sure. Well, and I would also say that if she answers that she's not aware of a particular investigation, it would suggest that she isn't testifying hoping to gain leniency in that investigation. So I would tend to agree. I don't know what she'll say, and perhaps you don't either.
Well, and we may know more by the time she testifies too. Certainly I wouldn't ask that question as a fishing expedition if we didn't have a good faith basis for it. But I will say, Your Honor, that having to take her answer at face value and having that be the end of the inquiry is a somewhat troubling proposition, given what we know about her and her integrity.
Well, this may be one where we have a 104 hearing on this particular issue to sort of get a better sense of what she says she's aware of and how she answers those kinds of questions.
That makes sense to me. Your Honor, did you respond specifically to Mr. Overstreet's proposition that it wouldn't just be her serving as her own alibi, in the sense that she was saying, no, I was not at OCI, but her testifying as to a lack of memory?
I have. I mean, I'll tell the sides that I tend to think that, you know, if the thrust of the defense is going to be that she doesn't remember, but well, I guess I would just have to hear what she says, you know. But I would tend to think that if there is going to be a suggestion, however it's put together, that it could not have been her because she was doing something else at that time, I would consider that an alibi defense. I will just have to hear how the testimony comes out before I can completely rule on that.
Okay. All right. If we could have just a couple minutes.
Yeah, I'll go off the bench, and Miss Lou can let me know when we're ready.
All rise.
All right, please be seated. And is defense ready for its next witness?
We are, Your Honor. The defense calls Nancy Crampton Brophy.
Okay. Mrs. Brophy, just come on up into the witness stand and clerk will give you an oath.
I'll have you please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask.
I think we need to do something about the hearing thing, too. Yeah, can we get a hearing so that
Sure.
she can hear me?
Yep.
Should I just?
Oh,
That one straight up there with her. I can help, counsel.
I think you can probably unplug it.
Oh, hang on, disconnect myself.
And then if you just keep this device a little farther from the microphone so it doesn't have feedback
Okay,
in your lap.
okay.
And then because we're being recorded, once you're set up, if you could please state and spell your first and last name, please.
I will.
Thank you.
My name is Nancy Crampton Brophy. That's NancyCramptonBrophy.
All right, when defense is ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me know if you can't hear me.
I will.
Because you can't read my lips.
Sorry.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Wichita Falls, Texas.
And how big is Wichita Falls, Texas?
It's 100,000, but a lot of that is the air base that's there.
Okay. When did you move to Oregon?
1990 or 1991,
And why did you move to Oregon?
because I wanted to take a year off, and I thought going to culinary school sounded like a whole lot more fun than saying, "Oh, I'm just taking a year off."
Okay. Do you remember the first time you saw Dan Brophy?
Oh yeah,
Tell me about it.
I culinary school in Western Culinary, which was where I was, had a program where 101 was the first class you took, and it was 6 weeks long, and you were separated out from the rest of the students. So when we joined the students, Dan had been hired either that day or the day before. So it was like we all came together at the same place at the same time.
Had you ever met a guy anything like Dan Brophy before you met him?
No, no, he was unique.
Can you tell us 5 things about him, maybe 5 things that separated him from the pack for you?
He was smart. He was really smart. And he was funny. You could have I laughed all the time when I was with him, and a lot of people going, "What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say?" Because he was very dry in his sense of humor. He was kind. He was so kind. That probably won me over more than lots of other things might have. He not only thought outside the box, this man lived outside the box. He really did not operate going forward the way most of us did. But the thing I probably liked the best about him, he loved me. And if that isn't a big number one item, I don't know what is, and I loved him back.
How many years were you together?
24 years, 10 months, 2 days.
That's pretty precise. What are you measuring from?
We were friends for a couple of years before our friendship moved further. I count it from the time our friendship moved further. You can be friends with a lot of people, but it doesn't count. Once you've said we're committing to others, people in other ways, then that's where I start the counting.
Did you and Dan Brophy complete each other or balance each other out?
Completely. I'm a flawed person. Dan's a flawed person. We came together and made up one really good team. He, his weaknesses were my strengths. My strengths tended to be his weaknesses. And together, it just fit immediately and never stopped.
When the two of you were together, did you try to give him a platform from which he could do his very best work?
I did. I did. Dan was bright. He was funny. He was lots of things, but he was also humble. And this is a man who needed a cheerleader. And I was his cheerleader. And this was not a one-way street. He was mine as well. But I helped him become more known for who he was, and because he would have just stayed in the shadows. He was that kind of guy, and he needed somebody to say, hey, this guy over here, he's really, really smart. You ought to listen to him, you know?
We've heard a lot during this trial about Dan and his demeanor in social settings.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to say that Dan was socially unaware?
No, no. Dan was very aware. He just wasn't a big participant. He didn't need to fill in the blank space. You know, a lot of times when there's a void in the conversation, somebody absolutely feels that they have to jump in and say something. Not Dan. Dan's perfectly okay with silence. So I'm sorry to say I lost the direction I was going there.
Okay,
I'm
let me
so
ask you this.
sorry. I was supposed to be paying attention, but I
Let me
went
stop
off.
you.
Okay.
Let me stop you. You've been described as the one who had better social skills, or the front of the house, I
Yeah.
think is what someone said, and that Dan was back doing the cooking or
Mm-hmm.
preparing meals or being the quiet guy to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Were there times that Dan helped you socially?
Oh, yeah. Oh, as someone said earlier, I'm a chatter, and I don't remember who said that, but I am a chatter, and I can just start running. And I never met a rabbit hole I didn't like. And there were times that Dan would come out, and he would be so subtle, and he would make this little move, and I knew I needed to calm down, back up, because he was trying to help me not run away with things.
Let me back you up.
Oh, sorry.
This move.
And actually, he did it. He did it with this hand because it was a C for chill. And it was real calm. If you were standing next to him, you wouldn't have noticed it. But I was looking at him, I knew exactly what he meant.
If you were on your way down a rabbit hole, he had a very subtle way of kind of trying to bring you back.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard that Dan didn't always lock doors. Is that true?
True.
We've heard that he collected stuff, lots of stuff. Is that true?
That's true.
What did you think about that?
One, well, this is a complicated answer. All right. I was perfectly okay with that. And the reason why I was perfectly okay with that is Dan didn't collect stuff that didn't mean anything. Everything he collected, he had a purpose for, or he could see a future purpose for. It wasn't like, he was gathering stuff he didn't need. It was gathering stuff that he could see he would need, maybe not today, but next week. To give you the best example of that, I was still catering in a kitchen I didn't own when Dan encouraged me, and I did it, started purchasing equipment. By the time I had my own kitchen, because of Dan's help on this, I was ready to go. I had all the equipment I needed. I didn't have to stop and buy equipment. Dan had the kind of vision where you could see it further down the road. And he had that vision for me, and he had that vision for himself as well.
Did Dan tend to, well, I don't want to use that word.
Okay.
Would it be fair to say that Dan's kind of working style, at least to the untrained observer, seemed chaotic?
Oh, yeah. Even to his wife, there were times when it seemed chaotic.
Was it?
No. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had a plan to get through to the end, And, uh, and you may not have thought, if you were a stranger, that he really knew everything was going on, but I assure you, Dan knew everything that was going on. And later on, he'd start a conversation in which I thought, well, Dan wasn't even paying attention to that, but Dan knew every detail. That was not him. You know, he knew what was going on.
You said that you were flawed and that he completed you.
Mm-hmm.
Were there parts of your personality or parts of who you were that maybe could be frustrating to Dan or exasperating to Dan?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I don't think that I'm not coming into this situation perfect by any wild stretch of the imagination. And I am a person who has been self-employed all my life. And if I see an opportunity, I tend to leap in feet first. And Dan is not like that at all. Dan is research, research, research. Okay, we'll do this. And here's how we'll do it. Me, I'm already in the middle of the water before I think, maybe a plan would have been a good idea. What do you think?
How did you guys resolve those times when maybe your imperfections were coming to the surface?
Well, we talked, you know. Every night we sat in the hot tub and we talked, and uh, the TV wasn't on, and we were sitting there, and he was giving me guidance on my catering company and what to do, and he was telling me about his day, and it's the frustrations we had were relatively minor, but I don't want to jump into a rabbit hole here, but there is an issue I could go to.
That's all right. We're going to try to keep you out of the rabbit holes.
Thank you.
In the nearly 25 years that you were with this man, did you ever doubt Dan Brophy's commitment to you?
No. And I never doubted his fidelity either.
Did you ever doubt your own commitment to him?
Never once.
What's it like to be without him now?
It's like you've lost an arm, you know, like you're just not as good as you were when you were with him. When you were with him, you were the best you could be when you were together with him. And now it's like, yeah, I function, but there's something missing.
Do you think, looking back on it now, that you held up your end of your marriage?
Oh, I do. I do. And I would tell you if Dan was here, he'd tell you the same thing. And he would tell you he held up his end of his marriage, of our marriage as well.
Did each of you marry the right person?
100%, absolutely.
I want to shift gears for just a minute
Okay.
and talk to you about money.
Okay.
There's been a lot said during this trial about how you and Dan handled finances.
Mm-hmm.
At times, it sounded like maybe you were even being shamed by some of the expert witnesses. Did it feel that way to you?
I would say when I told you Dan thought outside the box and maybe didn't even lived outside the box, yeah. But I would say I did the same. You know, we made choices that other people wouldn't have made.
Did you graduate from the University of Houston?
I did.
What was your degree in?
Economics.
And did Dan have a college degree?
He did.
And what was his degree in?
Biology.
Was Dan a very, very, very smart man?
Yes, he was. Probably one of the smartest men I've ever known.
Between the two of you, did you know how to run a business?
I did.
Did he know how to run a business?
It was a learning thing, and he learned with me as we went along.
And between the two of you, did you know how to run a household?
I did.
No. Maybe you did things a little different than other folks. Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
Financially, did things just kind of go off the tracks for you and Dan somewhere between 2014 and 2017?
Yes, they did. It was a series of things happened that all came together at the wrong moment, you know.
Let me ask you this. Was there a reduction in the income that the two of you were making?
Well, that was one of the first things that happened. Dan had a second income, almost a second job, because he taught classes all over town. He taught a lot for In Good Taste. He taught a lot for Portland Nursery. He taught a lot for Bob's Red Mill. In addition, he taught private classes in people's homes, as demonstrated by Vicki Schmalz, who talked about the fact that he did classes in her home for people. He did this constantly. We had a strong second income. I don't know if it was 14 or 15, but In Good Taste closed. Bob's Red Mill decided to remodel, and it changed the ownership from Bob to the employees. The Portland Nursery decided that they wanted to go in a different direction and did. So it was just a series of things that just kind of all in the same small period of time shut down that money.
Well, let me ask you this. In 2014, were you just about, was it 2014 or 2015 that you were about to turn 65?
I turned 65 in 15.
Okay. As you were looking at 65, did you want out of selling life insurance?
I did. I did. And that was even more emphasized by the fact when I was having eye surgery.
I'm going to bring you back to that.
I know, but I couldn't work. And all of a sudden, when you can't work, you suddenly realize there's no income coming in.
Okay. Oh, you mean from life insurance?
Right.
Okay. During the same period that your income dropped,
Mhm.
did you have some changes in your expenses?
Yes, we had a bunch of unexpected medical expenses, but both on me and on Dan and on the dog, you know.
Dan's expenses were what?
Dan had a tooth that he had implanted, and it was $4,000. It wasn't, an outrageous amount of money, and normally we could have handled it. But if you put it on top of the fact that I just had $8,000 worth of eye surgeries, and the dog decided to have a seizure one night, and to the tune of $2,000. It was just suddenly, all of a sudden, we had an unexpected, what is that? $14,000 worth of unexpected expenses that year.
Okay, let me redirect you just for a second.
Sure.
You talked about your own medical expenses and your eye surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a time in early 2015 when you had an alarming experience?
Oh, yes.
What was that?
I'm driving, and I reached up and I scratched my face. I must have done it this way. Okay, let me think about this. I reached up and scratched my face, and the tail lights of the car in front of me disappeared. And I'm going, oh, that's wrong. So I spent the next little while going, is this a fluke? Is this a fluke? And it wasn't a fluke. Now, perhaps if I'd been more rational, this would have made sense. But my mother had been diagnosed with macular degeneration, and I knew that by the time she died, she was practically blind. I am scared out of my mind that I'm going this direction. And so, yeah, I thought that was an alarming experience. However, because I was so afraid and because I was an idiot, you can choose either one. I didn't go to the doctor right away because I didn't want to know what he was going to say. My mother certainly never got better. And, I'm thinking, oh man. So it took me a while to go to the doctor to get it checked out.
Did you finally go see a doctor at the end of the summer?
I did.
And what did the doctor tell you was happening with your eyes?
Well, it was not quite that straightforward. One doctor sent me to another doctor, who sent me to another doctor, who sent me to another doctor, and finally he said, you have a macular hole. And so my left eye has, let me do a demo here, which will not show up, but the back of your eye looks like this, and there's a divot here that runs down, I think it's the ocular nerve. Well, what happens is when you have a macular hole, it gets worse and worse. It doesn't get better. And so he recommended surgery for me.
What happened when you showed up for surgery?
another little exciting moment in my life. I showed up for surgery. I was with my mother-in-law, Karen Brophy, and they took a blood test and said, you can't have surgery today. You've got diabetes. So I went home. I went to another doctor who got me on medication for diabetes, and finally got to have the surgery by having shots of insulin so that we could get through it.
Before you had the surgery, were you nervous that that was going to be a risky surgery for you?
Yes.
Is that,
You know, I'm from the generation who believes minor surgery is on someone else. On me, it's major surgery. And I was terrified. And I was terrified not only for me, but I was terrified for Dan as well, you know.
I want to stop you for just a second. Mr. Breton, could you show Ms. Brophy Exhibit 203? And could you maybe, do you recognize Exhibit 203?
I do.
What is that?
That is what's been known in this case as the Dearest Dan letter.
When did you write that?
In the middle of the night. I got up because I thought, if I don't come home, Dan doesn't know where stuff is. You know, I'm the keeper of the stuff. And Dan doesn't even know what we have. Now, we haven't paid for all this stuff all these years to have him leave it on the table. And he needs to be protected as much as anybody else in this. And I thought if I could write it out for him clearly and tell him how I felt at the same time, that he would have a basis to start with, you know?
Let me ask you about in the third paragraph of that letter, it says, I saw Larry Schneider and realized how difficult it would be for you if I died in surgery. More than anything, I'm afraid your life would be worse because you would leave money on the table and help that would help you get through this period. Who's Larry Schneider?
He was a client of mine whose wife died unexpectedly, and I had consolidated a lot of their insurance policies. She died before the 2-year period was up, and the insurance company slow walked the 2-year period. It's not fraud, it's something. It's the insurance companies have 2 years after you purchase the property after you purchase the policy to come back and say, we don't think this is right, you know, you don't get this policy. So if you die after 2 years, they don't have that right. And people would ask me questions like, well, this policy will cover everything, but if I commit suicide. And I would say, no, if you commit suicide after the 2 years, now this, then.
Rabbit hole,
Rabbit hole, I'm
Let me stop
sorry,
you for
I'm
just 1
sorry.
second. Did Larry Schneider's wife died during a period of time in which the insurance company could contest the death benefit for her?
Yes.
Okay. And so during this time period, just before you wrote this letter, were you trying to help Mr. Schneider as he was sorting out?
I spent many evenings with Mr. Schneider, really doing nothing more than being a friend, you know, and I pushed everybody I knew to push to get that insurance, to get the insurance to work.
Okay. I want to talk to you about some other parts of this letter. It looks like you've set out for him the policies that were in place on your own life. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you've given him the policy number, the amount, and I think there was a phone number there about who to call. Is that right?
That's right.
If you'll scroll down a little bit further, you gave him, let me stop right there. You gave him some advice about selling the house. What was that?
The one asset that we had was our house, and Portland market being what it was, we had some equity in it. And also we'd lived there at that point for 15, 16 years. So we had some equity in the house. And so I was giving him my opinion on what he needed to do. I knew Dan well enough to know that he would do what he wanted to do based upon what the circumstances were. But I was giving him my input up front, so if he,
Thank you, Mr. Breton. Go ahead.
I think we've gone rabbit hole again.
No, that's okay. That went missing.
Oh, sorry.
Did you talk to him in that letter about the need to fix up the yard if he was going to sell the house?
Right.
And
To-
why is that? Why were you telling him that?
Because the backyard had gotten away from us. He was, and I don't know exactly how it happened. Maybe we had a particularly rainy season and it got away and we just never got it back. But we also had, this other stuff going on, the medical, the lack of income coming in. And, I think we just lost focus. And so it had gotten away from us. So we knew in order to get what the house was worth out of it, we had to clean up the backyard.
Okay. The other thing you say there is, I understand you think you can live in a tiny house. Why did you say that?
Well, when Dan and I started talking about we were going to sell the house because and we were going to make some adjustments, Dan said, you know what we could do? Because part of the problem thing was we talked about subdividing the property, which would make it more valuable. And Dan said, we could live on the back half and get not one, two tiny houses. One I could have and have my stuff everywhere in it, and one that was tidy that you would want to live in. And I thought, Dan, you can't live in a 4-bedroom house. You certainly can't live in a tiny house. But we talked about the tiny house situation for quite a while.
And you thought that was a silly idea.
I did.
Okay, let's scroll down a little further if we could. I want to get to the part where you talk about your possessions. I think you have to go back up, if you would, Mr. Breton, to the first page. I can't think of anything I care enough to worry about.
Oh, I can't except the wedding crystal and my jewelry. And
So in 2015, were those really the only possessions that you had that you thought really mattered much?
they were. Everything else was just stuff.
Okay. You and Dan made choices early in your marriage, is that right?
It is.
Could Dan have taken a job, for instance, as an executive chef and made a lot more money?
He could have. He could have.
There was testimony from the OCI folks saying that I think they got salaries like in the $50,000 to $60,000 range, and those just never changed over the years.
That's true.
If Dan had wanted to make money, with his skills and his intelligence and certainly as well known as he was, could he have made a lot of money if he wanted to?
He could have. He could have, but everything is in life is a trade-off, and he would have had to have given up things that he loved, like the garden. But more than anything else, he loved teaching, and he was good at it. And he was the sort of guy who, when you came out of his class, you knew, you could identify the difference between rosemary and something else. You knew your herbs, you knew your product, and you knew your techniques. He loved teaching. He loved helping people who came to him and said, I'm not getting the math on this. Can you show me? So yeah, he could have made a lot more money doing something else. He could have been an executive chef for any number of restaurants in town, but we chose happiness over anything else. And so if he's happy and he's not making as much money, that didn't bother us, I was totally okay with what he contributed to the household and the fact he wasn't working 80 hours a week to bring that money in, that we were together,
We're going to get to this in just a minute. I don't want to talk about it now, but you also made some financial choices to do things that were interesting to you rather than make money.
I did.
And did Dan have any quarrel over that?
Not at all. He felt the same way I did.
Did the two of you, just kind of as a married couple, prioritize joy or fantastic experiences over things.
Mhm.
Is that true, even though Dan had lots of things?
Well, yes, but that becomes much more apparent when you have a house fire and you realize how little things matter. Oh man, we love to travel together, and that was, we were at our best when we traveled together. Uh,
I'm gonna
we love being together. Period.
I'm taking you back.
I know you are.
Taking you back. I'm taking you back between 2014 and 2017 when the financial wheels have come off.
Okay.
You've had this sudden loss of income
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time an increase in expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think that that was going to cause the economic upheaval that it did?
No, no. It was kind of like dominoes. I mean, one fell and then another fell, and you're thinking, really, you can stop falling now, and it didn't.
What did you do in the beginning? What did you do personally to address this upheaval? Did you have some Band-Aid solutions?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. The first year was easy to fix. The first year was a very small amount of money. And what we did was I wrote a life insurance policy on Dan, which immediately brought in a couple of $1,000s. The next thing I did was I borrowed money from an interest-free account that we had life insurance in. And that brought in enough money to get our house payments made, and it didn't cost us anything.
Let's talk first about that policy.
Okay,
Was that a policy that was taken out in November of 2016? Is that right?
that's right.
And how much was that policy? Do you remember?
250,000. I think it was 200, and there was some accidental on top of it.
And I don't remember which insurance expert, but it was suggested that you could have had a different $200,000 policy that would have cost you less.
Yes,
Is that true?
it's true.
Would you have gotten a commission on it?
Not the way it was suggested, but I wouldn't have gotten a commission, which would have been number one. And number two, it wouldn't have happened as quickly as the policy we chose. What he suggested was that we go through underwriting. And underwriting takes sometimes up to 6 months to make a policy come. We didn't have 6 months. We needed it to happen today. We had financial issues, and we were doing it more for the financial issue than we were doing it so we'd have another insurance policy. So we didn't have the time to wait for fully underwritten.
Okay, so this brought a quick influx of cash into your home.
It did.
And if you continued to pay the premiums on that policy for a year, you'd be able to keep the commission?
Mm-hmm.
So was it kind of like a no interest loan?
That was exactly what it was like.
Now, let's talk about this other quick Band-Aid that you talked about, the Forester's policy. Forester's is a weird kind of policy, right?
It is.
I shouldn't call it weird. It's just unique.
It is unique.
And does it have a savings component to it?
Yes. You pay a premium. Part of it goes for life insurance. Part of it goes to a savings account. And the savings account at the time we bought it, I believe, was 5.85%. Now, real frankly, if we'd put our money in savings in the bank, we would have gotten somewhere maybe 1% of interest. This gave us 5.85, and it was required savings. You might not have noticed this, but I'm betting you did, that I am not a saver. And so being forced to save helped me, and that was what we liked best about that. Also, we're not going down that rabbit hole.
When you put money, when you paid this premium, part of it went into the savings account, part of it went toward the life insurance benefit.
Exactly. And when we borrowed from the savings account.
So you're actually taking money out of your own savings account.
That's right.
And when you pay that back, do you pay it back with interest?
You don't ever have to pay it back. They don't care. It's, because you're continuing to put more money in each month, but they don't care if you don't pay it back. It doesn't bother them at all. I never got a done letter from them, said, really, you need to pay this back. It was interest free, and we didn't pay it back.
So that was a good Band-Aid.
That was a good Band-Aid.
I want to kind of jump back in time because I can go down rabbit holes too. I want to talk to you
I've
about.
trained you well.
I want to talk to you about the earlier years of your marriage and talk about the financial stability kind of early on.
Okay.
There was testimony, I think, by Tiffany Couch regarding your 1999 tax return.
Mm-hmm.
After you got out of culinary school, did you start a business?
I did.
And what was its name?
Chef de jour catering.
And in 1997, what year did you begin?
When did we start? We started in 92.
Okay. And did it take a few years before that company started to make money?
Yes. You know, they say if you start your own business, it takes 5 years. And at 3.5 years, we could see it. It wasn't there yet, but we could see that this was going to be a money-making thing.
Okay. And was it a money-making thing by 1997?
Yes, it was. 97, 98, 99, the year 2000, we made serious money. And serious enough money that we put $40,000 down out of Chef de Jour on a house. Now Dan put down $10,000, which was a gift from his parents, but $40,000 of that came from Chef de Jour.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We took a month-long trip to Asia, and in that month-long trip, we took a week-long cooking class in Bangkok at the Oriental Hotel. It was fabulous. That was a time in our lives where we had money and it was comfortable, and life is always easy when you don't have any external, issues. It's not can you get through the good times, it's can you get through the bad times.
It's true. I want to talk about buying that house.
Okay.
You said that you took 40 grand out of the business
Mhm.
as part of the down payment,
Mhm.
and that Dan got 10 from his parents
Mhm.
to help with the down payment.
Mhm.
When you first bought that house, were you both on the mortgage?
We were.
And how did you plan? What was your plan between the two of you for covering that mortgage?
The mortgage fell to me. One, I made more money, but two, it made more sense for me to pay the mortgage and for him to pay the other things. And that's how we worked it out.
When you first bought that house, you were on the mortgage. Were you also on the deed?
Yes.
And after 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
what happened to the catering business?
Oh man, I was scrambling to keep it together. And I was watching fellow caterers drop like flies. I used to joke that the only business worse to be in at that point was to be a florist. Nobody was partying. People were putting things off like marriages and things like that. And I mean, I was really working to hold on to it. And then we had a couple of fortunate things happen, uh, that it allowed me to get through the rough period, but we tightened our belts and got through it.
Well, this period right after 9/11, when it all just kind of becomes difficult and stressful,
Mm-hmm.
is that a period in which you refinanced the house in 2000?
Probably.
Let me show you. It's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 205. Was there a time when you had a conversation with Richard Freimark that he sent you this property report?
Yes.
Okay, and if you'll scroll down, Mr. Breton. You can see that better than I can, Nancy, because those are tiny.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can keep scrolling down. Stop. Go back. So it shows that in 1996,
Mm-hmm.
that the two of you buy that house. Does that make sense? Or is that 99? I
It's
can't
99.
see from here. Okay. And at that time, both you and Dan are on the deed.
Yes.
Is that right? And then all of a sudden, Nancy falls off the deed, and now it's just Dan Brophy.
Mm-hmm.
And that occurs, is that in 2004?
Yes.
What happened in 2004 that caused you to want to refinance that house?
Oh, we were struggling to keep our business together, And while the business may have been in my name, it was our business because Dan was just as involved as I was. So yeah, we refinanced to keep from losing the business.
Okay. When that refinance occurred, Dan was the only person on the mortgage?
Apparently, when we put it back in,
Okay.
this was a time when all the mortgages were being stated mortgages, and if we did it with Dan rather than with Dan and Nancy, I didn't have to show our income taxes. And since my income in the past few years had gone like that, we didn't think that was exactly what we wanted to do. So we put Dan on the mortgage because he could show a stable income.
Okay. Did you know then in 2004 that you'd fallen off the deed?
I didn't know I'd fallen off the deed. No, I thought I wasn't on the note.
Okay. After Richard Freimark sent you this property
Mhm.
report, and you realized what had happened, did you and Dan then take steps to put you back on the deed?
We did.
And do you remember about when that happened?
Not really.
Okay.
Uh,
It sounds like from what you're saying that there were times when the steadiness of Dan's income got you through various things.
It did.
You were self-employed and you had more the famine feast cycle. Even though you had these uneven times, did the two of you still kind of separate responsibilities where you would be primarily responsible to cover that mortgage? And did that continue even after Dan was the only person on the mortgage?
Yes.
So what would happen then? How would that happen that this mortgage would get paid?
Well, I would put a deposit into Dan's account, and he had a Wells Fargo account, and then we could just slip the money from his account right into our mortgage account.
Okay. So Ms. Couch testified that when she looked at things maybe from 2016 on to 2018, that she could see where this money moved.
Right.
Was that just always the case, that that money would move from one account to another? Did you eventually sell Chef du Jour?
I did.
When was that?
2005 or 2006. I think it was 6.
Okay. And by then, did the company have some debt?
Yes.
A lot?
Yes.
Were you able to, did you use the proceeds from that? You didn't go bankrupt though.
No, no, no.
Were you able to use the proceeds from that sale to pay off that debt?
We paid off a large portion of the debt.
So after you sold your company, what did you do to make a living?
I worked for Typhoon Restaurants for a while. And then we were skirting I'd signed a 5-year non-compete, and we were skirting with the non-compete because Typhoon wanted to open catering. And it really was close on whether or not I was living up to the terms of my agreement when I sold it. And so in the end, I had a guy who called me one night, and I thought it was a headhunter. And he said, and I was pretty casual because I hadn't really had a plan. And he said, I'd like you to come in for an interview tomorrow. And I hung up the phone and I had to Google to find out what it was. And I said to Dan, I said, I have a job interview tomorrow. And he goes, with whom? And I said, selling insurance. And he said, do you want to sell insurance? I said, no. And he said, why are you going to the interview? And I said, because I committed. And so I went to the interview, and that was how I shifted into selling insurance.
Did you have modest success selling insurance?
Yeah, some years were better than others.
Okay. Did you like selling life insurance?
No, I didn't like selling life insurance at all.
Was it hard?
Yes, but it was, when you're selling something that is intangible like insurance versus something that's tangible like big screen color TV, people can see the need for the big screen color TV a lot faster than they can see the need for life insurance. And so sometimes they made choices that I would think, what's wrong? But it was hard.
Your niece Susan described the two of you actually going and knocking on people's doors.
We did. But it wasn't cold calling, knocking. I mean, we had something that they would have sent in that said they were interested. Okay. And so we could, and you know, you call people up and say, I got your form that said you were interested, and they'd say, oh, I didn't send a form in. And you just say, yeah, pretty much you did. And so a lot of times it was easier to knock on the door and say, see your signature? Is this your signature? Okay, here I am. Let's make an appointment for when we can come back. And you didn't have to argue really, I didn't sign anything and send it in. I don't know why. You have my name and number, you know.
So when Susan described you guys getting in the car and traveling all around the state, like to the coast and all these other places, and going and just knocking on doors, was that what it was like to sell life insurance?
It was a hard scrabble. So yes.
And if you sold a policy, if you were lucky enough to have someone remember that they signed the form, and then actually was willing to make another appointment for you to come back to talk about insurance, and then you were actually lucky enough to get them to say, yeah, I'll buy that policy.
I'd like to think there was more skill than luck in that, but yes.
Okay, all right. But you sell the policy and you go away, and then like 3 months later they go, you know, why the heck did we buy this policy? What happens then?
We're not going to die. Yeah. What happens then is they call the company. They say, we don't want this policy anymore. And the company notifies us. Hopefully, some of the companies notify you. Let me be clear here and say you have an opportunity to save this policy, and you might go back out and see them, or you might call them, or you might talk to them. However, some companies just said, oh, by the way, you had this fall apart, and therefore you owe us this many $1,000s.
So you'd have to pay the commission back.
You would.
And when you got paid a commission, did you get paid the whole commission, or did the company hold some back?
You got paid 9 months of the commission. 3 months were held back, the last 3 months of the year, so that, which was kind of what was known as the bucket. And so you had money in the bucket all the time. So if the company suddenly says you owe this many $1,000, they have something to take it out of, you know.
Did that cause, and I don't know the answer, but Ms. Estrada has suggested that that didn't really cause a lot of cash flow bumps, maybe because of the bucket, but did you experience cash flow bumps because of that commission payback?
No, Susan and I were a good team, and we were a good team together, and so we pushed each other to continue. You know, sometimes being self-motivated is hard, but together we managed to keep things rolling, and we never had big bumps in our insurance when we were working together.
So how often could you sell a couple of insurance policies to the same clients?
Oh, that's not unusual.
Okay.
It used to be, to give you an example, we've all heard of double indemnity. And double indemnity is, okay, you've got this policy. If you die in an accident, you get double the money. Insurance companies quit doing that. They may say, oh, you get 25,000, something like that. But what they really did was encourage you to have a second accidental policy, so that you could say to somebody, hey, this covers you for any cause of death, but for really only a few dollars more. As you saw in my figures, Dan and I were both covered for $250,000 for $67 a month.
Let me stop you.
Am I rambling on?
I had a different question, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
If you want to finish that answer, you can, but we're going to come back if it's okay.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
No.
I'm rambling. But so they encourage you to do that. So that would be an opportunity where you would sell at the same time 2 policies, but you might actually come back to them later and sell them a different policy in addition.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
But to keep making money off of life insurance sales, did you need to keep finding fresh bodies?
Yes.
You need to keep buying leads.
Yes.
You need to keep knocking on new doors.
Yep.
You needed to keep finding new people willing to admit that they signed the form.
Yeah.
And let you in their house.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine going door to door like that and knocking on doors into your late 60s and 70s?
No.
What, as you and Dan are trying to figure out your solution to this financial
Right.
pinch, we'll call it a financial
Sure.
pinch. Let me ask you this, was it unnerving?
The pinch? Yeah. I mean, this was the worst that my part of the finances had ever been. Most of the time, I'm basically a hard worker and I worked. So this was the worst it had ever been. And it seemed like a lot of things were changing. Suddenly we're looking at retirement. Suddenly we're looking at the things that maybe we have been able to skirt along. One of the things, well, I'm not going to look at her when I tell you this because she'll say I'm going down another rabbit hole. But one of the things I heard about my generation of people is that we all believe we're 14 years younger than we are. So when we get to retirement, we go, how did this happen? And so, yeah, there was lots of things we had really not taken seriously that we should have that got us there.
Was Dan worried about whether you're going to be able to keep the house during this period?
No,
Were you?
no. Both of us knew we had the availability to, if we needed to, turn to family. We had the availability if we need to both of us take another job. There were things we could have done to make this work. Losing the house was never part of the plan. It was never even something that we got close to. We always knew, even in 2017, when I went a month longer than I thought we were going to go, we knew we had worked through how we were going to do that.
Okay. So sometime after your eye surgery and as you're bumping into the 2017 period, did you and Dan sit down and try to come up with a more comprehensive plan to take you into the future?
Yes, we did.
What was your plan for making money for you?
Well, in this, I guess I'm going to tell you my in-laws saved me on this. They came to me and said, hey, look at Medicare. Can you help us with this? And so I looked at, and I had other clients as well who were changing. They like you. They're buying policies from you. They want to have your opinion on this. And so the first year that they did this, that they said, hey, we need help. And I said, hey, let me get trained so I can do it. I rushed down and took Medicare training so that I could do it. So I wrote 12 policies that year where I was scrambling to do it.
Sure.
About 10:45. Let's take our morning break and resume at 11. right, please be seated. And when you're ready to continue, Ms. Maxfield?
Thank you, Your Honor. Where were we? You were talking about Medicare.
Oh, and I'm sorry, if you want, Ms. Brophy, you can take your mask back off.
Oh, thank you.
I think you were testifying that you kind of stumbled into Medicare because your mother-in-law and your father-in-law needed some help.
Yes.
And what year was that happened?
That would have been 2015.
Okay. And you probably already testified to this, but how many policies did you sell?
That year, 12.
Okay. So 10 more than your in-laws.
Right.
How did it come to be that you were able to sell the other 10?
Because some of my clients were older and going into it, and they called me,
Okay.
and said, what do you know about this? Can you help us?
Does a life insurance license, a license to sell life insurance, also allow you to sell health insurance?
Yes.
And so is that how you were able to sell Medicare with your life insurance license?
That's how you're eligible to be able to sell.
Okay.
But they won't let you sell Medicare with that. You have to take a specific Medicare test. You have to, for every Medicare provider, you have to take their qualification test. And so it is, you spend a month to 6 weeks every year getting prepared.
And I'm imagining there are a number of different Medicare products or
Yes.
different companies that sell Medicare products.
Yes.
And if you worked for company A, could you sell company B, C, D's products or just company A's?
No, you could sell B, C, and D if you took B, C, and D's qualifying test, which meant that you had passed the initial test, and then they had their own version of it, which was essentially like training you on their product.
Okay, but in 2015, did you have both the licensing and kind of the company's leeway to sell any Medicare policy?
No, I was really limited in what I could sell in 2015. But by the time 2016 came around, that had expanded greatly.
Okay. Well, before we get into the different years, I want you to describe the advantage of selling Medicare over selling life insurance.
Well, if you sell a life insurance policy, you get a big hunk of money, which you may have to pay back if they don't keep the policy. Medicare doesn't work like that. One, it's complicated. Two, the people are all over 65 and they are not eager to change 18 times. There's not a huge significant difference between each policy. There are some reasons to have a different type of policy, but once you've determined that, nobody's offering a better deal. It's really regulated a lot by the government. So people don't change that much. They find something they like, they find something that works, and you keep up with them and you check in with them every year. Here's the magic about Medicare. You don't get that much money for selling a Medicare policy. You can sell, a policy till the cows come home. But if I sell 12 policies in 2015, and I sell, I think 36, 50 maybe in 2016. In 2016, not only, actually it's 2017 because you don't get paid till the next year, but you get the money from 2016 all over again, plus 2017. In 2018, now if you haven't lost anybody, you get 2016, 2017, 2018, money will all come in 2019. So you can see if you worked hard for even a short period of time, like 5 to 6 years, you could have a retirement income that would continue on and on and on. And this was like a light coming on over our heads. We said, look at this. We have a retirement income if we do this right. So, for example, you could have $100,000 a year coming in retirement if you work for probably about 10 years. and you worked hard. This is not a question of you sailed through. I mean, you worked hard during that period to pick that kind of money up.
But eventually you have a book of clients that would carry you through,
Yes.
as long as you made the minimal effort of taking care of them, making a call and making sure things happen in the next year.
Right.
Okay. And I think you said that in 2000, did we start in 2015?
We did.
And you sold 12 policies. What happened in 2016?
I'm trying to remember the number of policies I sold. It's I want to say 50, but it could have been less than that. But in 2017, when we figured out how this worked, and Dan and I had come up with the plan, I figured out enough about Medicare that I wasn't fumbling in the dark. I sold 120 policies. I was considered one of the outstanding salespeople with United Healthcare who was operating with them, and they told me this on a regular basis because I sold that many policies. And it wasn't that hard. You just had to commit to things.
What did you have to do to sell those policies? We heard about kiosks because I keep talking about them.
Right.
Tell us about a Medicare kiosk.
Well, I'm trying to remember how many days a week it was, but it ended up being a total of 6 days a week. I was in a Fred Meyer's kiosk in Oregon City. In McMinnville, I was in a Walgreens kiosk. I occasionally had picked up other kiosk short-term visits. So what you do is you cannot go and approach somebody in the grocery store and say, hey, you look like you're Medicare age. You want to talk to me? That's not done. You sit there at the kiosk, and if somebody walks by and says, you know, my mother-in-law's on this, you can start a conversation. And as you can see, when I told you I was chatty, I'm chatty. This is an ideal situation for me. People walk by and they chat, and sometimes we talk about books, sometimes we talk about other things. But I can talk to a stranger. And so for me, it was just like, and you sat in a kiosk and they came to you. It wasn't like you had to go and knock on a door. Now, other places, and I was with Providence, and that's who I'm thinking of first, and also United Healthcare would have these people who called in and said, we need information. And yeah, they all had in-house salespeople, but a lot of times they would have do what was known as a blitz, and they would invite you in, and you got to call these lists of people. And sometimes that would result in 7 to 10 policies. A lot of it was you had to just keep working. You had to keep, you hang up the phone and you call the next person. And you talk to them long enough to see if they really have a question. And sometimes you went out and saw people who you knew weren't going to buy another policy from you, but you went out just to solve their Medicare problems.
Let me ask you this, these phone blitzes, you're calling through people. You can't sell a Medicare policy over the phone, can you?
You could.
You could?
I would think it would be bad, but you could.
Okay.
People need to be able to know what they buy, and particularly with Medicare.
So typically, as you called through these people, if you found someone that was interested, you would actually go out to their home?
Mm-hmm.
Where were these homes?
Everywhere. Everywhere. Mainly, I would tell you they were, but you kind of got to pick. You had call lists from various places. Like occasionally I called Salem. But I tried not to get too far out into the boonies. But I went to the coast. I went to Vernonia. I went to, I'm coming back this way, Oregon City, and all those little towns around Oregon City, like Estacada, Malala, all those places. Down in McMinnville, there's Sheridan. There's all of these places around there that you call and you say, I'm in your area, and they would say, great, and you would come to see them.
So would it sometimes be that you do a phone blitz in the morning and find yourself out in Estacada or Malala in the afternoon, meeting with the client that you'd called earlier?
Yes.
Okay. So it sounds like the upside of Medicare is that you can build up this book of clients that if you take care of them well, will provide an income stream all the way into your 80s.
Right.
How old are most of the people who sell Medicare?
Oh, I'm young. When we go to a Medicare meeting of people who sell Medicare, I'm the young one in the room. And it's generally men, so there's not a ton of women. And you know, they're older. I would say old, but I'd have to include myself there as well, and so we won't go there.
So, so you have this job that you can do into your older age, that you can, you could also just take the book of clients that you've developed over 5 years, hold steady and just take care of those clients.
You could.
But if you wanted to, you could just continue doing what you're doing, heading out to kiosks and phone blitzes and build your book into
Yes.
your 70s.
You could, and beyond. And beyond. I saw men who easily had to have been 85 to 90 who were still out working it. And the problem with just letting your book sit is you end up with the law of diminishing returns. And so people die, people change, so you have to keep pumping air into the balloon to keep it up.
Okay. So what's the downside to Medicare, selling Medicare?
It is a very short window. 90% of the policies written on Medicare are written between October 15th and December 7th. That's when you get all those repetitive ads on TV, and you just pray for Medicare season to be over so you don't have to see Joe Namath one more time. But what I can tell you is that is the downside, and that is also the upside. As retirement income, you're only working 6 months out of the year to create this, and you don't have to work 365 days a year or whatever it breaks down to with weekends and holidays.
Well, is there another disadvantage, like when you get paid?
Oh, major disadvantage. Okay. So you go out October 1st because you have a 2-week prep time. You go out October 1st, you're lining up appointments, you're doing what you can do. You work like a dog through Thanksgiving and into December the 7th. And so in the following January, your money starts to trickle in. So you've now worked since October 1 to the end of the year, and you've got not one dime. But in January, it starts to trickle in, and it trickles in January and February. But I've had it trickle in as late as April. So it's a real cash flow crunch. And you have to be prepared for that. And that was kind of what caught us up in 17, was that we knew it was going to happen. You just really aren't prepared to work as hard as you're working and realize you have no money coming in, and you have to figure out a way around that.
You said you had to be prepared for a cash flow crunch.
Mm-hmm.
Had the two of you talked about and thought you were prepared?
That was when our program really started coming together. Yes, we had talked about it. And yes, we came up with a solution that we hoped would work. But it really wasn't until the Medicare season had ended that we thought, yeah, this happened, and it's happened the way we planned it to happen, and we can see that the light at the end of the tunnel is not another train. So,
well, here you're having this happy time, and your house is almost in foreclosure. So what's that about?
Okay, so let's go back to what the plan was. The plan was pretty simple. I was going to start taking Medicare myself. That eased up a couple $100 out of Dan's employment benefits every month because I'm now paying through a different source. Okay, we're going to take a loan out of his 401k, which we had done before and paid back. And we were going to take a loan to make up house payments and just get us started on getting the house ready to sell.
When did you take out this? Before we talk about the loan, I want to talk about one other thing that changed. The other thing that changed wasn't just your income.
Right.
The other thing that changed was Dan's income.
Right.
And what was that?
A friend of ours, Tanya Medlin, needed a weekend chef, and at that point, she needed somebody who could get food out on time in a reasonable hour that tasted good. And she said, "Do you think Dan's got any students?" And I said,
"Did you say weekend?"
At that point, he was working days.
Okay.
And I said, Dan would probably look at doing it. And she said, "You're kidding." I said, "No." And I went home and Dan said, sure. And so for the first time in several years, Dan has a job where he's actually cooking. And he likes it because he actually gets to cook for somebody other than me. Not that I'm not appreciative audience, but this appeals to him. So
And would Ms. Medlin give Dan some of the better shifts?
yes, we were very lucky. Tanya would say, come and work Christmas Eve, and it was more money. Work Christmas morning, and it was a lot more money. And we rearranged our schedule to hit the high money times.
Okay. What did you guys agree to do with the extra income that Dan was bringing in?
We had credit card debt. And we also had three things we were worried about. We didn't have car payments, but we had credit card debt for two credit cards, and we had a second lien on the house. And Dan was paying those off, and you could see it happening in that woman's testimony, that she could see how we went from having 20,000 to down to almost nothing in the period of about a year. You know,
And that's what the Avamere income did for you?
that's what the Avamere income did for us.
And if Dan had stayed alive and was able to continue working at Avamere, when did you think he would be completely out of this credit card debt and the second mortgage debt?
Oh, we would have been out of that. It might have taken till December, but the second mortgage debt, we planned to take care of when we sold the house. So that part would have probably been a little faster.
Okay. And now you started down a rabbit hole, and I can't remember which rabbit hole I stopped you from going down.
We were talking about what was the plan.
Yeah, okay. So part of the plan was to reduce your debt.
Yep.
Part of the plan was for you to make more money selling Medicare
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully to withstand the cash flow crunch.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the plan was for Dan to make more money working at Avamere.
Yes.
And you know, we've talked about this as a plan, but it sounds to me like much of this you've just sort of stumbled into.
Yes, I would. We had the plan. Okay, where it probably started was with the 401. It was with the loan from his 401k, but the rest of it kind of blossomed around that.
Okay.
So that we had the Dan knew that the credit card debt was going to kill us, and so he, you can only sustain so much interest, and so that was really his first concern was, let's get rid of debt. My first concern is, let's also get the house ready to be sold, because that was our major asset. And in addition, let's figure out how we're going to have an income in the future, and that turned out to be Medicare.
Okay. So this 401k loan that you've just described, you took that out in September of 2017?
That sounds about right.
And at the time you were behind on your mortgage, what, about $8,000? Somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000? I can't remember. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
But Dan took out a loan for $35,000 against that 401k. Why take out that extra money from his 401k when you're only behind $8,000?
Well, we did it so we could get the house ready to sell. We knew we were going to have to invest some money in that backyard to get it back to where it could sell, and we knew it wasn't going to be cheap. There were also little things the house needed, a touch-up paint job, stuff that we thought we could do, but we thought the 35,000 would cover that. And our plan was, he was now making these payments of $500 a month, but it wasn't really $500 a month because I had pulled out my insurance out of it. So it was really more like $300 a month he was making to pay it back. And then we were, I lost my thought.
That's okay. Let me take you back.
Sure, thank you.
So you took out this loan for $35,000.
Right.
You took the loan for $35,000 out of Dan's 401k.
We did.
And we called it Dan's 401k, but did you guys ever consider this is my money, this is Dan's money?
No, that was our 401k.
Okay.
And while it doesn't look like I contributed as much, keep in mind, I'm making house payments on a house that has serious equity in it. So I see it in my thinking is that I'm contributing to our retirement in the house, in making the house payments and having equity in the house, and Dan's contributing to our retirement by having a 401k.
Okay. So at least in September of 2017, when Dan takes the loan against his 401k,
Mhm.
it sounds like Dan is in agreement that you guys need to get the house ready to sell, because he
Oh.
actually borrowed money to do it.
He is. He is. And I think, you know, not everything in life is clear in terms of how you feel about something. Very seldom do you feel 100% about anything one way or the other. And I think Dan wavered back and forth on this because I think he loved the house, he loved the yard, but the excitement of, I have a new yard that I can rethink the plan on. Because for Dan, I mean, his motto was life is a science project. And if somebody says life is a science project, that means that once they've kind of at least worked their way through this science project, they're willing to go on to a new one. And that is really how I thought he saw it.
Let me stop you for just a second.
Sure.
Before you ever took out this loan,
Mm-hmm.
had you and Dan had the two of you had a conversation with Richard Freimark?
We had.
And was that about subdividing your property?
It was.
What did you learn about subdividing the property?
Well, I learned that we live in a unique neighborhood. So our neighborhood is unincorporated Washington County. And what that means is we don't have curbs, we don't have street lights, but we have large lots. And not only did we have large lots, so did all of our neighbors. So the neighbor just north to us had subdivided their property into 3. The neighbor further down the road was in the process of subdividing their property. There were, you
Let me
don't have houses.
I can help you with a picture.
Oh,
what about
good.
that?
Hey.
Can we show Ms. Brophy Exhibit 330, please, Mr. Britton?
Oh, this is good.
What is that?
This is our neighborhood.
And
Can I gesture?
Sure. You might have to stand up.
I may have to unplug too. Okay, so this is our house right here,
Can you show me where your house is? Right there. Okay.
right there. And this is 108th. At the end of this road with the little jogging is Walker Road. At the end of this road is Canyon Road, to give you an idea of where we are. 217 is right over here. So we are on the east side of 217, which also makes it desirable. Don't fall down, Nancy. So this is our house. Now, the house to the north of us is this house, which was there just like this when we moved in. Then they subdivided this and built this house. So the people who owned, they sold this house. The people who owned all the lots at one point or another were these people. They got a job somewhere else and sold this lot in the middle to these people. Further down, and you can't really see it, but there's another subdivision here. It's an interesting neighborhood, which you can't see, but it's an interesting neighborhood because everybody has chickens or alpacas. They're like little farms right in this area.
Where are the alpacas?
The alpacas are right back here. And that
So Ms. Alva really was feeding alpacas?
She was. She thought she was feeding llamas, but yeah. So that property is an interesting property because it runs like here. When she said it was 5 to 6 acres, she was exaggerating, but she was right from the standpoint it's bigger than all of our lots. And they have alpacas, and this house at one point or another had been a house where you could rent rooms for something. It was like, you know, a retreat place. But you can see how this is just a unique neighborhood for Portland. And we love this neighborhood. You know, we lived there for 20 years. We knew all the neighbors. We took Christmas cookies to all the neighbors.
So I'm looking at your property though. And
Okay.
your property looks like it's all cleared out. Was that photograph taken while you were living there?
No, this was after this is after it was been sold. And we felt because our house extends back slightly than this house, that what we wanted to do was rip out the garage, bring the driveway all the way back and not divide it into three, but divide it into two pieces of property so that everybody had an adequate yard.
Okay, can you sit, or you got more to say?
No, I can sit.
Okay. I didn't mean it that way, it sounded bad.
That's okay.
I'll ask you to roll over in a minute. Okay. So that was that's what your thinking was regarding subdivision.
That was.
And had one of your neighbors who was just a resident, Mr. Frymark's a commercial realtor.
He is.
Had one of your neighbors who had some residential real estate experience looked at the property?
They had.
And after getting all this input from other people, did you have, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but did you have a notion about how much more you could sell that property for if you had it not subdivided, so to speak, but ready to be subdivided?
Right.
And how much more could you make?
We expected it to sell in the neighborhood of 700,000+.
Okay. If you were able to do all that.
Right.
Were you going to be able to do any of that with the state of the backyard or the back lot?
Not at all. That absolutely had to be dealt with. And even though we talk about the backyard, it creeped to the side yards as well. It, it was, the yard needed work.
Okay. Was that something that, we know that Dan's really, that he loves being outdoors, that he loves being in gardens. At this point, he's what, 63, going on 64. Would he have been able to do that?
He wouldn't have been able to do the bulk of the work. But he would have been able to continue to garden in an area that was cleaned up.
Okay, but could he have cleaned up that property so that it could be sold?
No.
Did he know that?
Yes. We discussed several options. One of the options we discussed was bringing in goats to get rid of our blackberries. And we looked into that quite seriously for several weeks and decided against that. And so then we started looking for who turned out to be the yard warriors.
Okay. Throughout this trial, there's been a suggestion that Dan maybe didn't know that there was a plan to sell, or maybe Dan wasn't in favor of a plan to sell, or maybe Dan had decided not to sell. You said your house was your primary asset.
It was?
Was it also your primary debt?
Yes, it was.
And how long do you think it would take to pay off that mortgage, the mortgage that you had on the house, if you didn't sell the house?
I would have been in my 80s and he would have been in his late 70s.
Okay. Did it seem reasonable to either one of you that you would keep working at the pace that you were working in 2017, 2018, at that pace that you were working when you were 80 or in your 80s and Dan was in his late 70s?
No.
If one of you got sick while the mortgage was still due, would the other one have been able to carry the mortgage by themselves?
It would have been incredibly difficult.
Okay. You have a degree in economics.
I do.
But it wouldn't require a degree in economics to know that selling the house and downsizing was a reasonable choice.
Yes, but there was also, that is absolutely true. And you didn't have to have a degree in economics, nor did you have to be able to teach math. Everybody in the family could figure out what was going wrong with our plan. But our plan had been built in from the very beginning. When we looked at the house and we bought it, I was 49. And we have a flight of stairs that goes from the first floor to the second floor, and a flight of stairs that goes from the first floor to the basement. And we knew, with a history of medical issues in our family, we knew that we would not have been able to keep this house in the old age. We talked about that in 1999 because of the flights of stairs and the fact that it was not set up for people who in their 80s would be climbing those stairs. And they were narrow stairs because it had originally been attic stairs.
Okay, so the house, just the structure of the house itself was going to create challenges in old age.
Mm-hmm.
But my question to you is, you said that, yeah, if Dan could do the math,
Mm-hmm.
did Dan do the math?
Dan did the math.
We talked about kind of the state of that garden that had been Dan's pride and joy.
Mm-hmm.
By 2017, 2018, was Dan enjoying his garden like he had in previous years?
No, he still gardened, but it wasn't the same. And also his gardening had changed because at that point he had picked up, this must have happened also when when we talk about our income going up, Dan picked up cucumbers. And a couple of the restaurants in town pickle their own cucumbers. So we would grow little cucumbers to be pickled. And Dan had this whole little concession thing going where he planted 2,000 pounds of cucumbers a year for these restaurants. And he would go and harvest and take them down and go and harvest and take them down and go and harvest and take them down. So that was also how but it was a struggle, more and more of a struggle as we kept losing more and more of the backyard.
Okay, so he didn't have the same area in which to garden.
Right.
You talked about taking out this loan against the, and right around the same time that you took out the loan, did you also rent a storage unit?
Yes.
And where was that storage unit? No, the name of the company. Was it Public Storage?
It could have been, yes.
Okay. Now, the state has suggested that you secretly rented this storage unit. Is it true that that was a secret?
Not that I know of, because
I'm going to stop you for just
okay.
a second, okay? I want to show you something. I want to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 212. Got your glasses on good. And I just want you to read this. Don't read it out loud, just read it to yourself.
Okay.
Is that an exchange between you and Dan Brophy?
Yes, it is.
A text message exchange?
Objection.
To have the jury step out for just 1 second.
All right for the jury?
All right, so earlier I had ruled that Exhibit 212 in its entirety could not come in. However, I had left open the possibility that individual text messages might. I don't know which text message we're talking about right now. I don't
Could
know
we
if,
put it up on the screen? Would that be possible?
I'm not sure either.
okay, yes, why don't we do
Which
that?
sub exhibit is it?
212.2 or 212.1, is that right, Ms. Weinmiller?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might as well go through all of
Oh,
it.
that's
I can't.
like, that's teeny weeny.
Okay, hold on, I can read that on my screen.
Yeah, I can read it out loud if that helps. Yeah, let's do that. Let's make each individual one big if you would.
Okay, I've now had a chance to read it, and just so the record reflects, the initial message, which is sent from a phone number listed as Nancy, says our yard guy is coming by after 2 today. Then there's a reply from a number associated with Dan saying, okay, does that mean we wait to visit storage? And then there's a response to that which says yes. All right. I'm not sure what you were about to ask, Mrs. Brophy, but the state objected, so let me hear the state's objection first.
The objection overall is hearsay, Your Honor, because these are out-of-court statements made by Nancy and by Dan. Specifically, of course, the one that I'm focusing on is the one made by Dan. I believe the defense is attempting to get this in to rebut some sort of assertion that the state made. First of all, I don't know that we made that assertion, but second of all, that's not a hearsay exception anyway. So the statement by Dan saying, okay, does that mean that we want to wait to visit storage being offered for the truth of his knowledge of the storage unit? And so we would object to that.
All right, and Ms. Maxfield, go
Well, Your
ahead.
Honor, the statement itself is, does that mean that we wait? Whether they wait or not is irrelevant. This is offered to show both that Nancy Brophy shared the knowledge with Dan Brophy that they had a storage unit and that Dan Brophy was aware of the storage unit. It goes to Dan Brophy's knowledge, Dan Brophy's state of mind, and it rebuts the inference that's occurred during the course of this trial that this was somehow Nancy Brophy's storage unit and one of which Dan Brophy didn't use and was unaware.
All right, I agree. I do think it's not being offered to show the proof of the matter asserted. The matter asserted is Dan's questioning if they were going to wait or not wait to visit storage. I think the purpose for which it's being offered and the purpose for which I'll allow it is to show he has knowledge that a storage unit exists, which I honestly don't recall, Mr. Overstreet, if it was directly implied that he was unaware of the storage unit, but I think there's been enough of an inference that I will allow this. But I would ask, are there other text messages that defense is wanting to go through with this witness?
Pardon me?
Because I think we should address them now rather than excuse the jury each and every time.
Your Honor, I would ask that the statements, I understand you're ruling on Mr. Brophy's text message, but the ones that appear in blue from Nancy, I would ask that those not be presented to the jury as well. Yes.
Let me ask the defense what their argument would be for that.
Well, I'm not sure whether, I think whether the yard guy is coming after two is irrelevant to what this is being offered to show. This is an exchange between husband and wife in which Ms. Brophy is talking about the yard guy coming after two, and Dan Brophy, he doesn't sound shocked. Who's the yard guy? But he also is acknowledging the fact that there's a storage unit. But we also have a couple of other text messages that demonstrate Dan Brophy's knowledge and acquiescence with respect to the yard work.
All right. I'm going to allow this first one, and I think just contextually there has to be, I'll call it the rule of completeness. I do think just standing by itself, okay, does that mean we wait to visit storage, would just seem odd. For contextual purposes, I'll allow this first exchange.
And Your Honor, I understand your ruling, but may I just make a record that
You can,
under
of
State
course.
v. Tooley, the rule of completeness does not apply.
Well, having tried that case, I think it does, and I'll allow it. All right.
Never good when the other guy tried the case. I think there's two other exhibits that we should maybe look at right now before we go on with Ms. Brophy, and I think they are called, are they 212 and 212.2 and 212.3, each one referencing the yard warriors.
Now, I'm going to assume there's an ongoing objection to these, but if the state wishes to state additional grounds for objection, I'll hear that too, but let me read this one. So this is one that says, from a number associated with Mrs. Brophy, I don't know where the yard people are. Maybe they don't work in the rain, but the maids are here already, so you ought to be able to come home with regular time. I'm getting my hair cut at 3 o'clock. Hard to keep that burn bar going in the rain. Okay, so what is this being offered for?
Your Honor, again, it's offered to show both Dan's acknowledgement of the yard work that's being done, and the fact that he's not resistant to the plan, and the fact that he can even understand why the yard work isn't going to carry on because they can't keep the burn barrel going. It goes again to show both his awareness and his acquiescence in the fact that they have yard warriors. But the other thing that it proves is that there is a delay in the yard efforts due to weather.
And what's the relevance of that?
Well, the state has suggested that there was not much yard work that was done between December and April, and that really the yard work starts to pick up rapidly after Mr. Brophy has died and Ms. Brophy is left as the sole decider. From that, they've suggested that Dan Brophy did not want the yard work done, and that Ms. Brophy had to kill him so that she could get the yard done because he was resistant to that effort. And there was even questioning of Mr. Denney on that point, and he explained, no, it was just too wet for us to get our machinery in there during certain parts of the year. But the state, with the questioning of Mr. Denney, had inferred that this really had to do with Mr. Brophy's resistance and Ms. Brophy needing to get Dan Brophy out of the way so that she could continue to clean up the property.
All right, does the state want to put any more objections on the record for this one?
Well, I would just, what I didn't state on the last one was I do believe there's a relevancy objection on this one as well to hearsay. Also, I would just note that the testimony, not the lawyer's questions that were presented to the jury, was that Dan was aware of the plan and went along with it, was part of it. That was what the testimony was. So I don't know what the defense is attempting to rebut when their own witness stated that about Dan as well.
All right, I'm going to hold off on this one for just a moment. Let's see the next.
212.3.
Okay, all right, it's in that. All right, and does the state have an objection to this one?
Same objection, John.
All right, and this one is just to make sure I've got the full thing. This is just the
Just
one.
Dan Brophy. It's just Dan Brophy, and again, it goes to show that, can you show that big again, Mr. Breton, so that I can see it?
All right, I've read it. It says, so this is from a number associated with Dan saying, got it, Steve, in a bit. Are the yard warriors in action today? And I think, Ms. Maxfield, you're saying this shows that he kind of has an awareness of and an acquiescence to yard work taking place.
That's correct. And again, the statement, are the yard warriors in action today, is asserting nothing. It's a question. It's not an assertion of fact.
Right. I will allow this one. Is that it? I'm sorry, were those the three?
Well, we didn't have a ruling on the middle.
I know
Oh,
we didn't. I just
okay.
wanted to see if
No,
there were any
that's
more.
all we got.
All right, let's put that middle one up again, just so I can, if you could enlarge it. All right, I'm going to allow this one as well.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And I'm just asking for planning purposes, because I do plan on breaking at noon for lunch, but we can do a little more questioning before then. I'm not going to hold you to it, but for defense, can you tell me roughly how long you anticipate direct going total?
No.
That's fine. That's fine. Fair enough.
Some parts of our examination are unpredictable.
Okay, then let's bring the jury back in and go till 12, and then we'll break. Yes, please. All right, please be seated. Okay, I did overrule the objection. Ms. Maxfield, you can ask your question.
Thank you. Mr. Breton, would you display Exhibit 212.1, please? And that's itty bitty. Can we go bubble by bubble? Would that work? Can you read that, Ms. Brophy?
Yes.
So let's begin. Can you tell me who this exchange is between?
I am texting Dan with this information.
Okay, and Dan's responding?
Yes.
All right. So, let's see, 2/12/2017. So it's December of 2017, and you are texting Dan, our yard guy is coming by after 2 o'clock today.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan's response? Okay, does that mean we wait to visit storage? And your reply? Yes. So my first question is, you had this storage unit at public storage. Was that a storage unit that you both used, both you and Dan?
Yes, it was.
So he was aware of this storage unit?
Yes. And we purposefully located it between his work at Avamere and our house. So it was really right down the road from Avamere.
After borrowing, you can take that down, Mr. Breton, thank you. After borrowing against the 401k, did you and Dan start looking for a professional landscaper to hire?
Yes, we did.
And how many landscapers did you contact?
3 total.
Okay, what were the answers?
No, and oh, wow, yeah.
Okay. I'm guessing, but who was, oh, wow, yeah?
That was Mr. Denney.
Okay. When did you hire him?
Well, I actually tried to hire him before he could get away. Once he said, oh, yeah, I figured he hadn't looked that closely. But I'm going to say December of 2017, but it could have been late November.
Okay. In December, or even November, December of 2017, I don't remember what the weather was like, but was it possible to get heavy machinery onto that lot?
No. We had a driveway.
Are you going to talk now just about geography?
Yes.
Let me ask you this.
Okay, sorry.
Did Mr. Denney have restrictions about when he was willing to come onto the property based on weather?
Yes, he did.
And did you have any control over that?
No.
Okay. So when would he come and when wouldn't he come?
Well, he pretty much came when he wanted to come, but when he said he wouldn't come was with the heavy equipment when it was still wet soil, because we would chop up the yard too much.
Okay. So did they start though in December of 2017?
Yes, they did.
Were they doing this heavy machinery type work or something different?
No, it was more the smaller items that could be done without the heavy equipment.
Okay. How did Dan Brophy react to James Denney?
I think he was, I think his hackles were up in the beginning. I think he was concerned about what was going on in the yard. I think he wanted somebody who was as concerned about his yard as he was. And I think Mr. Denney was the perfect man for that job, because he and Dan saw eye to eye on things. And I would say, after Mr. Denney had been there for a while, that in fact he and Dan ended up being friends over it, because they both, he would say this is important, and it was like Mr. Denney leaped on that and said this will be taken care of.
Let me
Sorry.
back up and just ask you to look at Defendant's Exhibit. First of all, Your Honor, I forgot to move to admit Defendant's Exhibit 212.1, so I would do so at this point.
All right, that'll be admitted.
Now let me show you, Ms. Brophy, what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 212.2 and ask if you can identify that.
Yes.
Again, is this an exchange between you and Dan Brophy?
Yes.
Can we make that a little bigger, Mr. Breton? Thank you. And who's writing in the beginning?
I'm writing to Dan.
And what's the date? Are we in December again of 2017?
We're 2 days later.
Okay. And so by now, have you hired James Denney?
We have.
And can you just read your part of this exchange?
I don't know where the yard people are. Maybe they don't work in the rain, but the maids are here already, so you ought to be able to come home at the regular time. I'm getting my hair cut at 3 o'clock.
Okay. And what's Mr. Brophy's response?
Hard to keep that burn barrel going in this rain.
Okay. So the first time they came, did they have a burn barrel?
They established a burn barrel. I think that they perhaps had been there a little more by this time. They had a burn barrel so that they didn't have to haul off as much of the wood and what have you from the trees. So yeah, we had a burn barrel going in the beginning quite a bit. By the end, not at all.
All right. So now I want to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit. Oh, Your Honor, I move to admit 212.2.
All right, it'll be admitted.
And now I want to show you, Ms. Brophy, what's been marked as defendant's exhibit 212.3. And this time, who begins the exchange?
Dan begins the exchange.
And what does it say?
Got it. See you in a bit. Are the yard warriors in action today?
And what's the date on that one?
That's January 17th, so that's about a month after.
Okay, so did Dan have a name for James Denney and Tamara Alva?
The yard warriors.
Okay. And is that how he referred to them always when the two of you were exchanging?
Yes.
Yeah. You said that Dan in the beginning was a little bit wary, but grew to appreciate Mr. Denney.
Mm-hmm.
Was it your sense that he actually liked James Denney and Tamara Alvey?
Yes, it was. I thought he found them entertaining, and they shared a lot of the same interest in terms of the yard, and I thought they got along really well.
You can take that down. Thank you, Mr. Breton. Oh, I move to admit defendant's exhibit 212.3, Your Honor.
All right, it'll be admitted.
So the two of you had decided to get the house ready to sell. Did you have a plan about what you would do after you sold it?
Not in the beginning. It was vague, and I think that was part of what made Dan, Dan's a guy who likes to have a plan, and I can fly by the seat of my pants much better than he can. But all that kind of changed in about the same area, in the same time frame. We went to an open house that Delilah.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh, I'm too far? So
You're going, we have 1 minute.
Oh, sorry. We won't go there.
And so
sorry.
I can bring you back to this in because that's a
Okay.
longer exchange.
Sure.
Okay.
Right now, we have just over a minute. Why don't we take our lunch break now and be back on the record at 1:30?